All stand, please. Please be seated.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Cox.
Thank you, Your Honour. Mr. Skelly, just before the break, I was asking you about the incident log, and it's still up on the screen. If Mr. Temponi could scroll down through that log further, please, through till 3 o'clock, around 3 o'clock. Yeah, just stop there. You'll see an entry there at 2:58:47, Hall A. That's, Adam Hall, volunteer. Yes?
Brigade Chief.
And the record there says, on scene with Sorrel Group 1 at track on Gandrills Road, Graham Stanley's property. Firefront is currently at grid reference 567/602, winds blowing 50 kilometres in southwest direction, fire burning quite well in thick terrain. We were talking a little bit before about grid references. Now that grid reference is quite different from the one above. You saw the 13-digit one. It's a 6 grid reference. I wondered if you might be able to explain to His Honour why there might be a discrepancy between the two references, grid references, in this incident log.
Yes, Your Honour. With a 13-figure grid reference, that's if we looked at a map of the whole of Tasmania, those first couple of digits are identifying that we are in Tasmania and looking at Tasmania. The grids run 100 from 0 to 100, and a square on a map normally indicates 1 kilometre in size. There's eastings and northings, which gives us the horizontal and the vertical lines on the map. With the increase of technology, when I started as volunteer, we just used to use 6-figure grid references, which is normally good for operations with your own local brigade area and stick on one map. But when you look at the whole map, a 6-figure grid reference could occur a couple of, 100 k's to the east or west of where you are. So the 13-figure grid reference gives us a more accurate, and especially with technology, with GPS, just gives us a whole, it's the same, a 6-figure and a 6-figure and a 13-figure grid reference will get you to the same spot. But with a 6-figure, there's a potential for you might look at another area 100 k's away. So the 13-figure will give you a lot more accurate number. But often, especially when you're in a fire truck, using a 6-figure and writing down 6 figures is a little bit easier than using the 13-figure. And normally, if I get a 13-figure, I'll just drop the last 2 numbers of the easting and the northing. The next 3 numbers will give me that 6 grid reference. Is the easiest way I can convert a 13 to a 6-figure, Your Honour.
Perhaps to just demonstrate that, if you could scroll back up, Mr. Temponi, to the 13-digit grid reference at the top there. Could you explain how you would go about that for that first grid reference, referable to 291 White Hill Road? Thank you.
If we just look at the 52612, if we drop, normally there's a couple of zeros. Just looking at it's a bit easier if I had a map in front of me to describe it, but the 5s are sort of...
That's fine. I'll just stop you there, Mr. Skelly. Could document 138 please be brought up? Right, just to assist you, have you seen this document before?
Yes, I believe I have.
Yep. So you're aware it's a aerial photograph of the general area of White Hills Road, Gandrills Road, Dunalley Road and the like. Yep.
Yes.
So you'll see the northings and eastings there. If you were to convert those into a 6 grid reference. Could you explain to us on how that might occur?
Yep, if I just looked at the in the middle number,
Yep.
the 556000, the middle top, if I dropped the last two numbers, then 560 would be those three letters I'd be looking at.
What?
So if I get rid of the zero on the right, there's three zeros. If I just drop those first two zeros on the right,
Yep.
then I'll be looking at 560.
5560?
No, just the next three numbers.
So you drop the first number as well?
Yeah, but there's, with the 13 figure, it gets confusing with the six. One of them's got six numbers and one's got five. There.
Okay, so that's at 7. And then for the Northings?
Yep. So for the 526 with 4 zeros on the right hand side. Again, I just dropped those the two right. There's 4 zeros. I dropped the 2 zeros, so I'd be looking at 600.
600.
So the intersection of those lines, I'd be going 560, 600,
Okay.
to bring me to where those lines intersect, just to the right, below the right of that star with the 8 on it.
So if we just rotate it back, that should give you the intersection of those grid references just below the number 8.
Yeah, just where those dotted lines join up.
Yep. But I think your evidence is that system of dropping to 6 grid references may be inaccurate to a degree of kilometres, I think you said.
It just makes it more accurate that you're in that location in Tasmania if you're using a 13-figure grid reference.
Okay. We'll stick with that map, Mr. Skelly, because also before the break, I think we'd arrived at 244, I beg your pardon, White Hills Road, and perhaps the map could be zoomed in around where you see the numbers 1, 2, 10.
Yep.
And perhaps I could ask you to assume that just further to the east of the number 2 is the property 244 White Hills Road. Does you understand?
Yes.
Okay. So you were there with Mr. Terenius around what time on the 3rd?
I think 2:55 p.m.'s radio log of arriving.
Yep. And what were your observations of the fire at that point in time?
From starting up the driveway, I can sort of see that there's 2 properties in the area sort of under threat from the fire. I was probably more concerned with the 244 property being a little bit higher up in the area. My recollection was that Dodgers Ferry 41 was on the fire edge towards 244, working on the fire edge at that time.
Just to stop you, where were you positioned when you were making these observations, referable to the house?
Pretty well from coming off White Hills Road up the driveway, so that 244's on my left-hand side, 242's on the right-hand side. So Dodgers Ferry 41 was towards that 244 and the fire edge in that area. My observations was that it was burning in fairly light fuels at that stage, and with the way the wind was blowing, that it was a backing fire and not the main head fire.
Threatening 244?
Yeah. Sorry.
As far as the head fire was concerned, can you tell me, A, where you were when you made these observations, and what observations did you make of the head fire?
My first observations from White Hills Road and the intersection up the driveway, I've had a quick chat with Mr. Terenius. I got out of the vehicle and the first thoughts was it's very hot and it's very windy as well. At some point I've driven up to a small ridge line and it'd be in the vicinity, there's a track, there's some red dashes on that map.
Yes.
Somewhere on that, I've driven up to that track for a look.
Could you just perhaps assist us? Perhaps Mr. Temponi could use his cursor. Can you direct him to where you made these observations?
Probably just above the number 2 area there.
So,
just looking at the track and the way the drive sort of runs in there.
Yep.
I remember from where I first talked to Mr. Terenius, we were in the paddock area and a bit low down, so I needed to get a better view up. So once I've come up on this little rise there, the main thought was the ground sort of fell away. There's another hill and the fire had already gone past the hill and there's a huge smoke column heading in a southeasterly direction at that time. I don't recall seeing like that next hill had already sort of been burnt through and the main fire front was on the other side of the hill. So the main thing I wanted to do is get Mr. Terenius in my vehicle because of his local knowledge and get in front of the fire and also meet up with Mr. Hall and Mr. Rainbird.
Okay. So to answer my question, the front of the fire had gone over the hill at that time. Yep.
Yes.
And over the hill being over the hill to Dunalley Road.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. I'll just pause you there, Mr. Skelly. Perhaps, Mr. Temponi, if you could just mark on the map there with the letter A. Mr. Skelly's location, and perhaps you could just confirm is that accurate there, Mr. Skelly?
Fairly close. Like at the time, I wasn't in the process of marking exactly where I was.
Approximately there.
The main thing I wanted to do was get a better view of the fire area.
Yes.
And that track that sort of runs along that bank there sort of give me a good view of the lay of the land as far as I could see across to that next hill.
Thank you. And that's the little ridge you...
Felt like I was on a bank and then that went down a bit and then there's another hill to that east-southeast area.
Thank you.
You can see it.
Yep. I'll tend to that, Your Honour. Perhaps AS1.
Thank you.
So, from that location, or what decision did you make from that location about what needed to be done with respect to this fire?
At this point in time, I'm thinking I've got a already large fire that's moving away from the White Hills Road area. I'm using the Tas Fire Service 1 to 55,000 map book, which gives me a good overview of that whole area. I knew where Dunalley Road was, the intersection, from living in the area, but I hadn't really been up there before, so I'm not sure what was exactly there. And at the time, I'm talking to Mr. Terenius, Mr. Hall and Mr. Rainbird were in that area. So I'm thinking I need to get to Dunalley Road as quick as I can. I need to get in front of that fire and get a better view of where the fire's heading and what's in the way.
And around that time, Mr. Hall was reporting in on the fire comms. Do you recall what he was reporting back to you?
Yes, Mr. Hall. I think I remember that when he's got into Gangels Road, that there's a large fire and that he could see some spotting in front of the fire.
Okay, and you set off for Gangels Road after that?
Yes, so once Mr. Terenius had talked to his crew and got them organised in White Hills Road and let them know that he was going to be travelling with me, we tried to organise a meeting with Mr Rainbird and Mr Hall, and initially we were going to head into Dunalley Road and meet them there. I think from what they could see there, they knew they had to get into Gangels Road, the way the fire was moving at that time. And it's taken us a little bit of time to get back out to White Hills Road, onto the Arthur Highway, back towards Dunalley Road. And I think we had a quick look in there.
You mean you went into the property or just looked up the road?
No, just a quick look up the road. And at that time, from what I could see, part of the fire had already started going past, so I really needed to get into Gangels Road as quick as I could. There was already other fire trucks in Dunalley Road. And then so we've finally met up with Mr Hall and Mr Rainbird at the last house in Gangels Road.
I'll just break that down a little bit, and this might assist you. If document 148 be brought up, please. Just take a moment to perhaps familiarise yourself with this document. You'll see it's a larger version of the previous map with Dunalley Road and Gangels Road on it. You said just before, to His Honour, you poked your head in Dunalley Road, I gather that was.
Yes.
Yeah. Could you say roughly how far in you got and what, and just you could again ask Mr Temponi with the cursor to perhaps mark on Dunalley Road the vantage point you got to?
Just from looking at the map, we would have probably just got where the red line sort of finishes on Dunalley Road.
So basically before the final residence at Dunalley Road, is that fair?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. And what observations did you make of, take them in turn, first fire?
I couldn't really see much fire. There's two things happening. Mr Trenius wanted to talk to one of the Dodgers Ferry crew in that area, which is on the side of the road. I'm still communicating pretty big time by phone. I could only just really see the smoke to the north, the fire moving away from the north to in an easterly direction.
So you could see the smoke to the north in an easterly direction.
So looking north, you could sort of see a big column of smoke with the wind blowing, pushing it to the east. Again, my main concern was getting to Gangels and getting in front of the head fire to have a look at what else was going to burn.
Albeit a brief attendance, could you, on that map, indicate where the column of smoke you were seeing was approximately?
Mainly to the north. It was just smoke. I didn't really have where we stopped, I didn't have a very good view of the area.
It's actually a bit low-lying there, isn't it?
Yeah, so I couldn't really pinpoint an exact location for Dunalley Road where it was, except to say that it was north of Dunalley Road.
We'll leave it at that. Again, I'll tend to that, Your Honour, AS2.
Thank you.
Oh, I should ask you your best estimate as to the time at that point.
I'm probably about 3:15 at a rough guess from around 3ish being in White Hills Road, the time to take, give me 5 or 10 minutes either side.
Sure.
Once I did get to Gangels Road, I had a lot better view, and I think it was around that 3:30 to 20 to 4-ish time frame.
So it took you 15 to 20 minutes to get from Dunalley Road around to Gangels Road.
Yeah, just like the gravel road was a bit windy, and
sure.
I hadn't been up Gangels Road before.
Okay. And you hadn't, obviously, not been there before, hadn't been to the property at the end of it either, I gather.
No.
No. And is that where you sort of made your next observations of the progression of this fire?
Yes. we've gone up at the Gangels Road and we've gone past the house. There's a couple other fire trucks already there, putting the hose out in anticipation of protecting the house there. My observations were paddocks in the area were pretty clear, or, like had stock on them. I think it was a horse property off the top of my head. So the paddocks had low amount of fuel. It was fairly open. Again, referencing my map book, it appeared that the fire was travelling north of Tanner's Creek and burning through the hilltops to the north of that Gangels Road.
Are you able on this map to give an indication as to where the fire was?
From where we parked at the house, it was to the northwest. It would be in where the cursor is, needs to go up another square.
In that square?
In that square, even a bit further to the left, but I probably can't pinpoint an exact area, but from where I parked to the left of the house, I was looking in a northwesterly direction, and there was a fairly broad column of smoke that was quite visible.
And moving
in an easterly direction. So it was a westerly wind was pushing this fire at this stage. I remember giving a sit rep to Hugh Jones, that was in the Regional Operations Centre, trying to describe that it was running parallel to the Arthur Highway, was one word I used it to sort of back up the way the wind was going from a west to an easterly, and it appeared to be going directly towards Mother's Brown Bonnet.
Is there any agreement between council as to where Mother Brown's Bonnet is on this photo? Is it the second square up and one in from the bottom? You're looking at the white squares.
Yeah.
In terms of agreement, Your Honour, all I can say is I think that's where it is.
Yes.
Which doesn't really get us much towards agreement, I'm afraid.
No, but it's the most prominent.
Well, this witness may know.
Yes.
Your Honour, there's a little bit of confusion when talking to the locals, because they refer to Mother's Brown Bonnets and Guns Hill as Red Hills,
yeah,
which is confusing, whereas on the fire service maps, Mother's Brown Bonnet and Guns Hill, there was no sort of Red Hills, it was just sort of a local naming. I'd be thinking Mother's Brown Bonnet, just looking at this photo, is on that right-hand side, from the bottom 1, 2, sort of 3 squares up. There's a fairly significant area of bush there within the line that's sort of marked as the fire edge. I know from looking from Gangels Road, you could clearly identify it because it was the largest hill to that east.
That's certainly our position, Your Honour.
About 3 up and 1 in.
Yeah, those last 2 grids from 3 up. And
3 up the last 2 grids.
Yes. Perhaps.
Any thoughts about that, Mr. Reid?
Well, I stay where we are, Your Honour, and 2 up and 1 in.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
From the evidence. Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Skelly, I think you identified 3 up, 1 in from the right.
No, the last 2.
Sorry.
3 up, the last 2 on the right. The whole area.
Yeah, he's done that. Okay, sorry. Look, I'll let you direct Mr. Temponi. Perhaps you could direct the cursor and Mr. Temponi to your understanding of where Red Hill / Mother Brown Bonnet is.
Just to your right. That's probably the start of the upslope. A bit hard without contour lines and looking at the map, but I'd assume that'd be the start of Mother's Brown, just with the size of that bush.
Okay.
To the right there.
Well, mark that please as B.
I'm not sure, or
Oh,
maybe
sorry.
just a bit further to the right.
Yeah, we can,
I don't, do you want marked where the hilltop is, or just the
whatever
general area? Your
whatever
Honour?
defining feature you, the start will do, or the top.
Probably just a little bit further to the right. That'd be, I'd assume that'd be sort of the hill slope there, the westerly slope of the hill there,
Okay, so
so that the ridge wouldn't be too far in that sort of that area.
thank you, Mr. Skelly. I'll just stop you there. If that could please be marked B as the westerly slope of Red Hill / Mother Brown's Bonnet. And I attended that as well, Your Honour.
Thank you.
And again, as best you can, Mr. Skelly, the approximate time you made those observations. Sorry, that's a bit out of context.
3:30 to 20 to 4, I thought.
Around about there when we first got there, and I'd spent a bit of time in that area organising things before moving on.
And coming back to where you marked A as the fire, is that the front of the fire, or is that the front as spotting fire, or spotting fire that's become the front? Do you know?
I would have, it would have been a bit of both, if that makes sense, that there would have a bit of a short-term spotting. Probably the big thing was while I was up in Gangels Road, where that point A was, the fire front didn't stay there very long. It moved fairly rapidly towards Mother's Brown Bonnet to the east. The smoke column, and you could see a fair bit of spotting in front of the fire, and it seemed to keep travelling along that hill, or the series of hills above Tanner's Creek, to the north of where we were at that last farmhouse, again straight towards the western side of Mother's Brown Bonnet.
And were you seeing a smoke column or multiple smoke columns, or was it impossible to discern?
It was mainly one big smoke column, but you could clearly see smoke coming up from spot fires in front of the main fire edge. Again, a lot of it was just like the strength of the wind that was increasing the fire intensity and the amount of bush in those hills.
Could you see any columns further back towards Dunalley Road?
Not from memory. It was mainly like there's still smoke coming there, but from where I was at the Gangels Road, looking at most of that smoke was in that northwest area, and then it rapidly moved further to the right of that map towards the east.
Thank you very much, Mr. Skelly.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Cox. Mr. Reid.
If I don't have any questions, thank you, Your Honour.
All right. Thanks, Mr. Skelly, for your attendance. You're relieved on the trial. That means, of course, you're free to go, but you don't have to go. You can stay and observe if you wish.
Thanks, Your Honour.
Thank you.
Now, Your Honour, could I give you an update in terms of how we're tracking? We understand, as my learned friend mentioned to Your Honour before the break, there's been some communication with Mr. Hall, and I'm instructed that due to Mr. Hall's non-TFS related work commitments, he's not able to come back to court until Friday. But Mr. Reid and Mr. Brewer and Mr. Cox and I will have a chat about what we understand his evidence is going to be, and it may be that he's not required at all, but we'll need to take that under advisement. I'm also instructed, Your Honour, that there appears to be agreement between the parties as to the quantum of the test case plaintiff's case. Yes,
Well,
that's the correct
did you
sentence.
see the look of relief past my face?
It is a uniform look of relief, Your Honour.
Well, that makes things so much easier.
It does, and it helpfully as well, it obviates the need to call a couple of witnesses. So that also truncates things, which is welcome. And the third point, Your Honour, was that we have moved a little quicker this morning than we had expected. During the mid-morning break, we made contact with Mr. Marsden Smedley, who was our next witness, but I don't think he's yet in court. So we don't expect he's going to be here until 12:30, and so we're in Your Honour's hands as to whether perhaps we take an early lunch and adjournment and come back early, or just a very long lunch.
Well, it actually suits my purposes to take a long lunch, not in the way that's understood in some professions, but I've things to do. I was going to say in a moment that I had to adjourn a little bit early today, so Mr. Reid?
Yeah, that's convenient, Your Honour.
All right, well, what if we adjourn till, say, 2 o'clock?
Thank you, Your Honour, that would suit us well.
All right, we'll resume at 2 p.m. Thank you.
Please.
So stand please. This honourable court stands adjourned for 2 p.m.